and the crunch of the mighty shovels would get louder and louder. Once the foxes actually saw the sharp metal edge of one of the shovels as it scraped up the earth just behind them. Keep going, my darlings, panted Mr. Fox. Don't give up. Keep going, the fat Bo shouted to Bunsey and Bean. We'll get him any moment now. Have you caught sight of him yet? Bean called back. No, not yet, shouted Bogus. But I think you're close. I'll pick him up with my bucket, shouted Bunsey. I'll chop him into pieces. But by lunchtime, the machines were still at it, and so were the poor foxes. The hill now looked like this. The farmers didn't stop for lunch. They were too keen to finish the job. Hey there, Mr. Fox, yelled Bunsey, leaning out of his tractor. We're coming to get you. You've had your last chicken, yelled Bogus. You'll never come prowling around my farm again. A sort of madness has taken hold of the three men. The tall, skinny Bean and dwarfish, pot-bellied Bunsey were driving their machines like maniacs, racing the motors and making the shovels dig at terrific speed. The fat Bogus was hopping about like a dervish and shouting, faster, faster. By 5 o'clock in the afternoon, this is what happened to the hill. They're really digging in it. The hole the machines had dug was like the crater of a volcano. It was such an extraordinary sight that crowds of people came rushing out from the surrounding village to have a look. They stood on the edge of the crater and stared down at Bogus and Bunsey and Bean. Hey there, Bogus, what's going on? We're after a fox. You must be mad. The people jeered and laughed. But this only made the three farmers more furious and more obstinate and more determined than ever not to give up until they had caught the fox. Chapter 7, We'll Never Let Him Go. And here's the people. Chapter 7, We'll Never Let Him Go. At 6 o'clock in the evening, Bean switched off the motor of his tractor and climbed down from the driver's seat. Bunsey did the same. Both men had had enough. They were tired and stiff from driving the tractors all day. They were also very hungry. Slowly, they walked over to the small fox's hole in the bottom of the huge crater. Bean's face was purple with rage. Bunsey was cursing the fox with dirty words that cannot be printed. Bogus came waddling up. Dang and blast that filthy, stinking fox, he said. What the heck are we going to do now? I'll tell you what we don't do, said Bean. We don't let him go. We'll never let him go, Bunsey declared. Never, 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 cried Bogus. Did you hear that, Mr. Fox? Yelled Bean, bending low and shouting down into the hole. It's not over yet, Mr. Fox. We're not going home till we've strung you up dead as a dingbat. Whereupon the three men all shook hands with one another and swore a solemn oath that they would not go back to their farms until the fox was caught. What's the next move? Asked Bunsey, the pot-bellied dwarf. Well, we're sending you down the hole to fetch him. Fetch him up, said Bean. Down you go, you miserable midget. Not me, screamed Bunsey, running away. Bean made a sickly smile. When he smiled, you saw his scarlet gums. You saw more gums than teeth. Then there's only one thing to do, he said. We starve him out. We camp here day and night watching the hole. He'll come out in the end. He'll have to. So Bogus and Bunsey and Bean sent messages down to their farms asking for tents, sleeping bags, and supper. Chapter 8. The foxes began to starve. Aw. That evening, 3 tents were put up in the crater on the hill. One for Bogus, one for Bunsey, and one for Bean. The tents surrounded Mr. Fox's hole, and the 3 farmers sat outside their tents eating their supper. Bogus had 3 boiled chickens smothered in dumplings. Bunsey had 6 donuts filled with disgusting goose liver paste, and Bean had 2 gallons of cider. All 3 of them kept their guns beside them. Bogus picked up a steaming chicken and held it close to the fox's hole. "Can you smell this, Mr. Fox?" he shouted. "Lovely tender chicken. Why don't you come up and get it?" The rich scent of chicken wafted down the tunnel to where the foxes were crouching. "Oh, Dad," said one of the small foxes, "couldn't we just sneak up and snatch it out of his hands?" "Don't you dare," said Mrs. Fox. "That's just what they want you to do." "But we're so hungry," they cried. "How long will it be until we get something to eat?" Their mother didn't answer them, nor did their father. There was no answer. As darkness fell, Bunsey and Bean switched on the powerful headlamps of the 2 tractors and shone them on the hole. "Now," said Bean, "we'll take in turn to keep watch. One watches while 2 sleep, and so on through the night." Bogus said, "What if the fox digs a hole through the hill and comes out on the other side?" "I bet you didn't think of that one, did you?" "Of course I did," said Bean, pretending he had. "Go on then. Tell us the answer," said Bogus. Bean picked something small and black out of his ear and flicked it away. "How many men have you got working on your farm?" he asked. 35, Bogus said. "Well, I've got 36, Bunsey said. "And I've got 37, Bean said. "That makes 108 men altogether. We must order them to surround the hill. Each man will have a gun and a flashlight. There will be no escape for Mr. Fox." So the order went down to the farms, and that night 108 men formed a tight ring around the bottom of the hill. They were armed with sticks and guns and hatchets and pistols and all sorts of other horrible weapons. This made it quite impossible for a fox, or indeed for any animal, to escape from the hill. The next day, the watching and waiting went on. Bogus and Bunsey and Bean sat upon small stools, staring at the fox's hole. They didn't talk much. They just sat there with their guns on their laps. Every so often, Mr. Fox would creep a little closer towards the mouth of the tunnel and take a sniff. Then he would creep back down again and say, "They're still there." "Are you quite sure?" Mrs. Fox would ask. "Positive," Mr. Fox said. "I can smell that man Bean a mile away. He stinks." Chapter 9. Mr. Fox has a plan. For 3 days and 3 nights, this waiting game went on. "How long can a fox go without food or water?" Bogus asked on the 3rd day. "Well, not much longer now," Bean told him. "He'll make a run for it. He'll have to." Bean was right. Down in the tunnel, the foxes were slowly but surely starving to death. "If only we could have just a tiny sip of water," one of the small foxes said. "Oh, Dad, can't you do something? Couldn't we make a dash for it, Dad? We'd have a little bit of a chance, wouldn't we? No chance at all, snapped Mrs. Fox. I refuse to let you go up there and face those guns. I'd sooner you stay down here and die in peace. Mr. Fox had not spoken for a long time. He had been sitting quiet, still, his eyes closed, not even hearing what the others were saying. Mrs. Fox knew that he was trying desperately to think of a new way out. And now she looked at him. She saw him stir himself and get slowly to his feet. He looked back at his wife. There was a little spark of excitement dancing in his eyes. What is it, darling? Mrs. Fox said quickly. I've just had a bit of idea, Mr. Fox said carefully. What? I cried. Oh, Dad, what is it? Come on, said Mrs. Fox. Tell us quickly. Well, said Mr. Fox. Then he stopped and sighed, sadly shook his head. He sat down again. It's no good, he said. It won't work after all. Why not, Dad? Because it means more digging, and we aren't any of us strong enough for that after 3 days and nights without food. Yes, we are, Dad, cried the small foxes, jumping up and running to their father. We can do it. You see if we can't, so we can. Mr. Fox looked at the four small foxes and he smiled. What fine children I have, he thought. They are starving to death and they haven't had a drink for 3 days, but they are still undefeated. I must not let them down. I I suppose we could give it a try, he said. Let's go, Dad. Tell us what you want us to do. Slowly, Mrs. Fox got to her feet. She was suffering more than any of them. From the lack of food and water, she was very weak. I am so sorry, she said, but I don't think I am going to be of much help, my darling. You stay right where you are, my darling, said Mr. Fox. We can handle this by ourselves. Let's see. This is the trickiest part ever, is showing the pictures. Chapter 10, Bogus's Chicken House, number 1. This time we must go in a very special direction, said Mr. Fox, pointing sideways and downward. So he and his 4 children started to dig once again. The work went much, much. Okay. I dare not do that, said Mr. Fox, because this place I am hoping to get to is so marvelous that if I described it to you now, you would go crazy with excitement. And then, if we failed to get there, which is very possible, you would die of disappointment. I don't want to raise your hopes too much, my darling. For a long, long time, they kept on digging. For how long, they did not know, because there were no days and no nights down there in the murky tunnel. But at last, Mr. Fox gave the order to stop. I think, he said, we had better take a peep upstairs now and see where they are. I know where I want to be, but I can't possibly be sure we're anywhere near it. I'll show you the next one as I read. Slowly, wearily, the foxes began to slope the tunnel up towards the surface. Up and up it went until suddenly they came upon to something hard above their heads, and they couldn't go up any further. Mr. Fox reached up to examine this hard thing. It's wood, or it's wood, he whispered. Wood planks. What does that mean, Dad? It means, unless I am very much mistaken, that we are right underneath somebody's house, whispered Mr. Fox. Be very quiet now while I take a peek. Carefully, Mr. Fox began pushing up one of the floorboards. The board creaked most terribly, and they all ducked down, waiting for something awful to happen. Nothing did. So Mr. Fox pushed up a second board, and then, very, very cautiously, he poked his head up through the gap. He let out a shriek of excitement. Did I show you in the floor there? That's a little better if I hold it closer. I've done it, he yelled. I've done it, first time, I've done it. He pulled himself up through the gap of the floor and started prancing and dancing with joy. Come on up, he sang out. Come up and see where you are, my darlings. What a sight for a hungry fox. Hallelujah, hooray, hooray. The four small foxes scrambled up out of the tunnel, and what a fantastic sight it was that now met their eyes. They were in a huge shed, and the whole place was teeming with chickens. There were white chickens and brown chickens and black chickens by the thousands. Excuse me, bogus chicken house #1, cried Mr. Fox. It's exactly what I was aiming at. I hit it slap in the middle. First time, isn't that fantastic? And, if I may say so, rather clever. The small foxes went wild with excitement. They started running around in all directions, chasing the stupid chickens. Wait, ordered Mr. Fox. Don't lose your heads. Stand back. Calm down. Let's do this properly. First of all, everyone have a drink of water. They all ran over to the chicken's drinking trough and lapped up the lovely, cool water. Then Mr. Fox chose 3 of the plumpest hens, and with a clever flick of his jaws, he killed them instantly. Back to the tunnel, he ordered. Come on. Come on. Back to the tunnel, he ordered. Come on. No fooling around. The quicker you move, the quicker we'll have something to eat. One after another, they climbed down through the hole in the floor, and soon they were all standing once again in the dark tunnel. Mr. Fox reached up and pulled the floorboards back into place. He did this with great care. He did it so that no one could tell they had ever been moved. My son, he said, giving the 3 plump hens to the biggest of his 4 small children, run back with these to your mother. Tell her to prepare a feast. Tell her the rest of us will be along in a jiffy, as soon as we have made a few other little arrangements. Chapter 11. Okay, here's another picture though. And this is on the next page. Chapter 11, a surprise for Mrs. Fox. The small fox ran back along the tunnel as fast as he could, carrying the 3 plump hens. He was exploding with joy. Just wait, he kept thinking. Just wait till Mommy sees these. He had a long way to run, but he never stopped once on the way, and he came bursting in upon Mrs. Fox. Mommy, he cried out of breath. Look, Mommy, look, wake up and see what I've brought you. Mrs. Fox, who was weaker than ever now from lack of food, opened one eye and looked at the hens. I'm dreaming, she murmured and closed her eyes again. I don't know if you can see that really good, but let's see. You're not dreaming, Mummy. They're real chickens. We're saved. We're not going to starve. Mrs. Fox opened both eyes and sat up quickly. But, my dear children, she cried, where on earth? Focus's chicken house number 1, spluttered the small fox. We tumbled right up under the floor, and you never seen so many big fat hens in all your life. And Dad had to prepare a feast. Oh, and Dad said to prepare a feast. They'll be back soon. The sight of food seemed to give new strength to Mrs. Fox. A feast it shall be, she said, standing up. Oh, what a fantastic fox your father is. Hurry up, child, and start plucking those chickens. Far away down in the tunnel, the fantastic Mr. Fox was saying, now for the next big hit, my darlings. This one will be as easy as pie. All we have to do is dig another little tunnel from here to there. To where, Dad? Don't ask so many questions. Start digging. All right, friends, I think we're going to stop there. And its next chapter will be chapter 12. It's called Badger. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, but we shall see.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Miss Sally.
Oh, my pleasure. You're welcome. I miss you guys so much. Thank you so much for showing up for the reading.